I should say that we're having members of Lyra come down to play some of the string parts, and some of these winds, it's Alan Bishop and Tom Hineker who play. They have demores. This is an instrument that was popular right in the 1700s, and then kind of fell out of favor. Now then Richard Strauss and some others started using it again. I think it's used in a couple of modern pieces by Ravel too. But anyway, it's this beautiful kind of halfway between an oboe and an English horn, kind of this mellower sound, kind of a mezzo-soprano sound compared to soprano oboe sound. It's just gorgeous. That is used frequently, including in the very next movement. Et in Spiritum is for solo bass. That's going to be Jacob Lasseter coming up from Luther. It's a fantastic kind of Sicilian, kind of a spirit. Bach again, spiritus, spirit, anima is spirit, and it's also breath, and respiration, spirit. They're kind of linked. So many times, many composers, especially Bach, when he's talking about the Holy Spirit, he uses winds, and the accompaniment for the Et in Spiritum is oboes, oboe d'amores with bassoon, with the bass. It's just, you gotta hear it. It's fantastic. I should say also Lynn Kaufman, who sang so beautifully for the orchestra last month, and singing for Lyra, I think this coming weekend maybe. Is going to be the soprano, and Hyun Soo Lathrop's going to be our mezzo. She has some wonderful arias to do. And John Grell's a great Baroque tenor, is going to come down and sing the tenor. So and there are a couple singers in the room I can see right here who are going to be singing those high notes. Alan Hightower came up to coach our group early on in the process in January, and we did an incarnatus, and the sopranos have a high F sharp and a high G sharp. And he just turned around and said, "What was Bach thinking?" But that was a complaint of Bach. Both the instrumentalists and the chorus would say, well, whatever he can do with his fingers and feet, he thinks we can do with our bows and our voices. And it is hard. It's technically very challenging stuff, but such a reward, because there's so many layers of greatness. So at Resurrexit happens next, and it's a big party, and it's just an explosion of joy. And the basses have a big, long solo that if you ever sing it in a concert, you're going to sing it the rest of your life in the shower. Et iterum venturus est, you probably know. Bob still probably knows it right now. And then there's the great aria by the bass. I should say one other thing, that one of the many layers is that, Bach was not silly or stupid, and he knew that the Dresden court had X or Y players. So, for example, in the Quoniam, the other bass aria, he knew there's a great horn player, Schindler was his name, and so he wrote this really challenging horn part for him to show it off. And he also made it a Polonaise, because the Elector of Saxony was about to be the king of Poland, and he was trying to really ingratiate himself, and it's just such a beautiful way. He had all styles at his disposal. Why not? Okay, so now, and before I forget, if you want to come up and just kind of look at the score at any point, I would be delighted to have you just kind of take a peek and just kind of see the layers of, this is all handwritten. This is just in a time with no electricity. I mean, it's pretty astonishing when you look at the manuscripts. And Bach's hand when he was young was just it was like a piece of art, And as he got older, he was more laborious. The musicologists can tell which member of the family or which of his students is writing which part, because they've been looking at him so many years. They can kind of figure, that's Alt Nicole, and that's somebody else, or that's CPE writing that part. And they've kind of figured out this B minor. It wasn't clear that it was one of his very last acts, one of his very last musical acts until the last 20, 30 years, where they just figured out all the paper, for one thing, figure out where it had to be written, at what time. And it was so late, they thought maybe it was earlier. Anyway, interrupting myself, come up and take a look at the score if you want. So the last two parallel the first two. The Confiteor also has a Gregorian chant in it in a little different way. It starts with kind of this Renaissance imitation, again with a walking bass line underneath. Really dense, complicated, beautiful 5-part texture that just think, how can you manage all those parts and make it still sound like a whole? And then, one more thing, he adds in a Gregorian chant, in the bass, and then he puts it in canon with the alto 2 measures later. And then he puts it in super long augmentation in the tenor, which feels like this, rock solid declamation, and I have confidence in the remission of sins kind of thing. This long stentorian proclamation by the tenors, and all the other themes weave around it. Just, oh yeah, they happen to all go together. These themes, I could make them all work together. And then something amazing happens. Another thing amazing happens. The end of the tenor chant occurs, and then the music kind of just dissolves. It sort of falls apart, and I think maybe Johnny L. Gardner calls it a shadow falling over the music. The direction, the harmony, all becomes murky, and it slows, and it becomes adagio in about 4 measures. And this is the text, et expecto resurrectionem mortuorum, and I look for the resurrection of the dead. And this is just spooky music. It's very harmonically ambiguous and directionless and bewildered almost. And it's a lot like Haydn's depiction of chaos from the creation, which is 50 years later. It's very advanced harmony, kind of non-functional harmony almost. And it goes to very dark keys. And this is the only part of the, and then he sets it again, et expecto resurrectionem mortuorum, in the next movement. It's the only text he sets twice in the whole Mass. But he sets it 2 totally different ways. The first one is bewildered, lost, almost without hope, or without direction, and then the next is a triumphant one. But I can't help but personally think that this is because of all the losses he's had in his life. And for him to think, what would that be, the resurrection of the dead? He was orphaned before he was 10. His mother died when he was just barely 9, and his father died like 9 months later before he turned 10. And he had to go live with his older brother. And then he had 4 siblings die in his lifetime. He had one of his sisters die when he was like 1.5, probably been, changing his diapers or whatever. And then he had 11 children die in his lifetime, and his first wife. His first wife died at 35, I think it was. And they didn't die, well, 6 or 8 of them died, on day 3 or something like that. There were twins that died, like in the first week, but several of them died at age 3, or age 6. And to have this kind of a loss, and then to have this text, I look for the resurrection of the dead. What does that mean? What can that mean? Are they going to come? Am I going to see them as little kids? Is there some other? What is that mystery? That's what's in this music, I think. What does that mean? And he doesn't know. I mean, it's beyond. We see in a glass darkly. We don't really understand. So this music is searching for an answer that's not really obtainable in this life. But then it falls into, but I believe, credo, but I have faith. I look for whatever that is. It's beyond me, but I have faith in God, and this will be an amazing thing, and we should dance about it. And so this is this amazing, amazing moment, the et expecto, where he sets it 2 totally different ways, and then ends the credo on a triumphant note. So I think it's probably just best if we just play that. I hope you can hear this. as I just play this, it just occurs to me that I've showed you all the big, bombastic chorus movements. That there are many movements that are more intimate, more for duet or trio, that are of a different style, more modern style, like his sons would like. Those sons, they don't really know. But anyway, I'll maybe play a little of that as you're leaving. I don't know if you have any questions that come off the top.
Just a couple comments.
Yeah.
It just strikes me that crucifix, Bach theologia crucis would be the term. And I think he's actually borrowing that emphasis from Philippians 2, where Paul, in that poem, has even death on a cross as kind of the crucial turning point in that poem. And the verbs go from passive to active. Suffered, crucified, died, and was buried are all in the passive. And then resurrects would be in the active. And so it leaps into this. Am I telling you stuff you already know?
No, that's good, great.
And so it all of a sudden becomes the active voice in that part. And then you only have 3 first-person active nouns. Credo, I believe, which rules the first 2, actually we would call it the first 2 articles of the creed, I believe. And then you get confiteor,
right.
I confess, in one baptism, and et expecto. Those are the only 3 first-person verbs in the whole thing.
Yeah.
I just think it's really interesting how he really digests that all, and the way you bring out the music really helps read the text better. So I thank you for that.
Yeah.
It really enlightens the text, and it shows how Bach is...
He's thinking.
He's really thinking, yeah. No, absolutely.
He's living with that text.
Well, and so are you, but but it just strikes me that it comes out even more.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that comment. Yeah. Other comments, questions? It was almost lost, I mean, his sons wrote or performed the credo part, and I guess CPE Bach had he gave half of his music to, was it Wilhelm Friedrich, and half to CPE, and Wilhelm was just kind of, he just couldn't keep it together, and he sold some of the music, or he lost it, I don't know what happened. So we lost a lot of cantatas, many of his cantatas. CPE mostly hung on to everything, and CPE gave it to a publisher, Nigli, I think it is, and it was actually published about 50, 60 years after his death. And Beethoven wanted a copy, and Haydn wanted a copy. So they looked at it to study it, and it probably was influential. It wasn't really performed till later, probably as a whole thing. And Mendelssohn was a big Bach revivalist, brought a lot of Bach back and kind of maybe changed it. It was kind of hard to find the original intention because it was through this lens of another, generation or 2 removed. But fortunately, we do have a lot of what he did. Is this astonishing thing. It just turned out this music like, just like a faucet. And it's just so great all the time. So anyway, thanks for listening, and if you can come listen to the full performance, I think it will be a moving experience.